town has a ghost story that's been passed down through the generations. But what if those legends were true? My name is Miranda Young, and I'm the Ghost Biker. Hey everyone, and happy Thursday. Welcome back to the Ghost Biker Garage. I am your host, the Ghost Biker, and we have a fantastic show tonight. My guest is going to be talking about something that I've always found extremely fascinating, and I know that a lot of people that I've had conversations with have felt the same way. So I'm really excited to get him on tonight. But before we do, just kind of want to touch base with everyone that's here in the comment section. Thank you guys for joining us. If you have any questions for myself or my guest, please feel free to put those over there in the comments. And if you don't mind, put them in all caps, just because I want to make sure I don't miss your question, because sometimes we get to rolling into a conversation and we'll get going and, people will be putting a lot of questions in there. And because, I'm hosting, moderating, and doing all here with the show, I want to make sure I don't miss you. So if you don't mind, just do that. But I want to say hello to the couple folks that are in here already. I want to say hello to Dr. Sumner, my business partner up at the historic Scott County Jail, and Miss Marie Gibbs. She was on, Miss Buffy. She was on week before last. And I know we've got some other folks on there. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. So a couple little things that's going on here. We'll touch base with that before we get into tonight's show. We're trucking away there at the historic Scott County Jail with some really cool August and September events. We've got some flashlight tours, a couple ghost walks, got those on the schedule. If you would like to book one of those, you can do that at www.historicscottcojail.com. We're actually coming up on our 1-year anniversary. We opened last year on September 4th, and it's been an amazing year. We have got we've got the jail True Crime and Punishment Museum going. We've got a escape room that's getting ready to open up. We've also had, we've had probably around 50 paranormal investigators that have come in over this year-long time. We've got two groups coming this weekend, one on Friday night, one on Saturday night. So we're super excited about the different things that we've got going on. And I know that we're going to be gearing up for spooky season there that's coming up this fall. So we do have a couple dates that are available still left in October, a couple Saturdays. Definitely got some Fridays and Sundays also there in September. So if you are interested in booking a paranormal investigation at the historic Scott County Jail, you can do that on our website as well. We've got some more evidence we're going to release on that people have captured that they've been sending to us. So stay tuned for that information that's coming up, as well as some other cool and interesting announcements that Dr. Sumner and I have been working on that we just aren't at liberty to say just yet, but hopefully we'll be able to very, very soon. So that's all that's going on there. We're also working on a dual event, myself and Dr. Sumner from Soul Sisters Paranormal. We're doing an event there in Franklin, Kentucky at Octagon Hall. That's going to be on September 10th, and we will have the booking calendar, the ticket sales up tomorrow. And that's going to be 2 parts. First part is going to be a haunted history motorcycle ride that's going to take place that morning. We are going to limit it to 20 bikes. So you're going to want to get on that early. And then we're also doing going to have a meet and greet, but then we're going to have a ghost hunt there at Octagon Hall, which we did cover that last season during, I think it was like episode 3 of season 4. So check that out. We are super, super excited. We're going to limit the number. We're going to allow 14 people. We're going to sell 14 tickets to that. That way we can split it up between 7 and 7 between myself and Dr. Sumner. So we're super, super excited. And that should be up to purchase tickets tomorrow. So one other thing before we get to our guest, we did not get to do this last week because I was up at the jail and working some double shifts up there. So we didn't get to do this last week, but we started a new segment here on the show. As you know, if you've watched my show in the past, my series, Superstitions, Folklore, storytelling. That's something that's extremely important to me and something that kind of got me really interested in the paranormal. So I found this book at a used bookstore, David Pickering's Dictionary of Superstitions. And so I've got a little segment that I'm doing on the show here where I'm sharing some different superstitions from this book each week. And kind of like to ask my guests the same thing, if they've had any superstitions that they have followed. One that I'm going to talk about tonight, it's very, very brief, but it's about the hairpin. And I thought this was really interesting. It says, because of its association with hair, the humble hairpin is not without magical significance. Finding a hairpin promises making a new friend. Losing one is more ominous and suggesting that an enemy is close at hand, which that's kind of interesting. I don't know if a hairpin would translate into today's like ponytail holder, but I know they're two different things, but I always have mine and I'm always losing them. So hopefully there's not an enemy close at hand. If a hairpin works its way loose in the hair, this is taken as an indication that someone has that person in their thoughts. And though in Germany, this may signify the end of a love affair. So kind of interesting when it comes to the hairpin. So if you have any favorite superstitions that you grew up with, put those in the comments. Send those to me there in through my Ghost Biker page, and we'd love to highlight that. So I'm going to go ahead get to tonight's guest because we do have some really cool topics that we're going to cover here. My guest tonight is none other than two-time and now almost three-time author Ron Yacovetti. Ron has a unique background as a stand-up comedian, MMA commentator, writer, and paranormal investigator. While Ron enjoys all aspects of the paranormal, his affinity and area of specificity is in the area of ITC, which is instrumental transcommunication. Ron has spent nearly 4 years doing innovative afterlife research and experimentation in the European methodology of ITC, known as DRV, which is direct radio voice, and has recorded some impressive results. So I'm really excited about that because Ron has actually sent me some of this audio. So we're going to be sharing some of that here as we discuss this. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. Welcome, Ron. Oh, I got you muted. There you go.
That's all right. Thank you for having me. Beautiful intro. I love it. Almost didn't make it tonight because I was actually looking for two things. I was looking for a hairpin and hair for the hairpin.
And I got to tell you, Ron, I had no idea that you are so funny. Last night, I was going through and I caught up on some of your stand-up. Do you still do stand-up now?
I have not done it for some time now. I did it for a number of years. It is one of the most difficult things to do in the beginning because you don't see the nuances with structure and with confidence and delivery and subject matter. And there's so many things you don't see. When you start out, you see someone else telling jokes, getting laugh, and you're not. And you're like, what's wrong with me? So it's a hard knocks thing, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. That experience, it really does give you the ability to connect with people in anything. Any career that I went into, I would at least have that advantage going in, because it does really help you connect and read people, not in a psychically way, read people, but, in a connecting kind of way. And it was inherent to, I grew up in a family full of clowns. So it was like, that was how I survived, I think.
Well, I loved it. And I really enjoyed it. It was interesting. And I can actually see how that, like you said, can really tie in, because a lot of the time the study of, the paranormal is really a good study of the living as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to, if it's a passion or even a hobby, you're supposed to enjoy it. And so, knowing when to buckle down and be serious is one thing. But, laughing is, even in an investigation, laughing is energy. It's a positive charge you're putting into the room with everybody. I like to do that sometimes just to kind of level the room a certain way. But, it's if you're enjoyable to be around and other people are enjoyable, that makes for a nice experience. And we all know you can't guarantee paranormality when you go somewhere, but you can guarantee a good experience by
Absolutely.
Being a certain way and being with people who are like-minded. So,
and sometimes that's what seems to work with certain spirits, is when you are more lighthearted and laughing versus when you come in being serious and almost interrogating them.
Yeah. And so let me just say too, because I saw that Dr. Sumner was watching, all you guys that work together are brilliant. We need that in this field so much. Here she is, Chris Summer. She's so good at what she does. I can't stress enough that having that level of integrity and detail in the work that you do is important, because we're questioned at every turn with what we do. Richard Michelle, also watching tonight, he's an amazing author, phenomenal to work with in the field. He's a guy who's called me an awesome guest. He's a guy who has the thing in the field balanced. He has it down.
Oh, wow.
Knows what to do, knows how to do it, knows how to have fun, pull back at the right times. I mean, he's really, really great to work with. He lives in Jersey also. He's part of New Jersey Paranormal Project. And so we work with him often because it's enjoyable, and it does really, yield good results. You're welcome, Chris.
Yeah, I will definitely need to get him on the show, because,
I would.
We connected earlier, and I saw, some of his books and stuff while I was, going through and preparing my show notes for tonight. And so just fascinating. And that's the thing about you, is you surround yourself with intelligent, good, easy to work with people that know their field. And so that says a whole lot. And I feel like we're always learning from each other,
Definitely. Yeah. And there's enough of us out there that are on the same page as far as the passion we have, the desire to learn, and the enjoyability of collaborating with different people. Like, both my girlfriend Lourdes Gonzalez and I have been part of teams before, and then we opted for just being a duo. And we named our team Gonyak because her last name's Gonzalez, mine is Yacovetti. So she came up with that actually for an email, and we also figured that Yak Gon sounds like a bug repellent. That probably won't work. So we went the other way with it. But we work with all these different people. We get to work with different groups and teams all over, and then that's fun for us. We get to expand and go to different places, and you find a core group of people who keep gravitating back to each other, because there's so much enjoyable time spent when you're with certain people. So it's important. A lot of time and money goes into this. It's got to be enjoyable.
Absolutely. So, as I'd said in your intro, you do specialized more on the ITC side of things. If you would kind of just tell us, we'll go ahead and kind of kick it off with, tell us, in case people don't know your background, how you got started, and then how you got interested in the side of ITC and what really it is.
Well, like everybody, I found EVP fascinating. You can speak in a room with nobody else, and out of thin air on a device that picks up what your ear can't, you get a response. That is sobering. I don't care how long you're doing it. Every time you get it, it's like a kid who saw 3D on a movie for the first time. It's like, wow. ITC I fell in love with from when I started investigating. I used to live in Southern California. So I used to do tons of hours at the Queen Mary, Glen Tavern Inn, and a lot of places out there, Pasadena Playhouse. And I saw my first experience, from the Fast and Furious, and he was on the other show, I can't remember the name, with John L. Tenney, Chad Lindbergh. And I got to tell the Chad story, which is what I call it, in Vegas last December at the Power Unity convention they had. I was at the Glen Tavern Inn. It was Debbie Constantino was there, rest her soul, and a group of like 30 people, and they're doing a spirit box on the third floor, and everybody introduces themselves, and it gets around to the last two people. The guy goes, "Hi, I'm Scott." Debbie goes, "Hi, I'm Debbie." And then Chad goes, "Hi, and my name's Chad." And not even 15, 20 seconds, and out of the spirit box, and it was just shh the whole time. Nothing. No even blips from radio. And it goes, "I know Chad." And I was like, what is that? What is that? How did that happen? And I was hooked. So then I got a spirit box, and I used to go to David Oman's house in Beverly Hills, which is probably the most consistently active place I've ever been to. I love that place. I still talk to him when we go to California. He has us over for dinner. We run around the house. And I used to go around his house in investigations. He would have people follow me around with the spirit box. I was like, this is amazing. Real-time contact hooked me. And then the further I got into it now, especially in the last 4 years or so with direct radio voice, ITC is only around since I think like 1990 something, maybe 98, 94. And it was coined by a physicist in Germany named Dr. Ernst Sinkowski. And I know that the commonly accepted definition of instrumental transcommunication is using a third-party instrument that you can't manipulate. And that's true of the process. But Sinkowski named it and came up with this to differentiate between EVP, which is what all vocal phenomenon was, which is record and review, compared to having contact in real-time dialogue. Okay. That was the point of ITC. So the fact that was even possible or looked possible especially when you're a newbie. I was hooked. I was like, is that you? That you can? No, really? And so I really wanted to dive into it and find out. And then, like everybody else, I evolved through the different ghost boxes and stuff. Some of the best ghost box builders of all time are among us right now. Steve and Katie Holte, Austin Maynard, Jay Prather, Katie and Katie Stafford. If I'm leaving anybody out, I'm trying to think. I know William Pimblott was doing it for a while. These people are brilliant minds, and they have made strides in the field. They have made incredible devices, trying things that haven't been tried, reverse sweeps, half reverse, forward, backwards. It's amazing. And all the promise and possibilities that were born of that area of study just hooked me. And so I wanted to try to see if this whole having conversation in real time thing was that serious and how far it could go.
Absolutely. And that's that's kind of how I am with my research on through the paranormal is, my background is in photography, and a lot of the time you won't see me posting a lot of photography because I'm able to debunk a lot of the stuff that I find. But there's something really incredible about EVP and the audio evidence that you get, because that's one of the things I know that I do that with Ghost Spiker. I know that that's something that Dr. Sumner does. And I know you guys do this is trying to account for, the environmental factors that's going on around you. And, when you are just the only female, and of course I'm a solo investigator for the most part, every now and then I may have a videographer with me, but, when there's a one female or two females there and you capture this male voice, or whenever you're able to hear that disembodied voice and it reply in real time, that's really hard to debunk.
Yeah, it is. And well, the one thing that'll never be cleared as hurdles go with that stuff is bias. If somebody truly has a bias against any of that stuff being legit or real, I always say that Bigfoot could hand them their car keys and they wouldn't believe in them. But that is absolutely true. When you get something like that and you can't find what would be a materialist worldview explanation to dismiss it. And for us, I've always had as the governing factors would be timing and relevance. When you say something, when you say, hey, what's in my hand? And you're holding your glasses, and then the word glasses comes out, the odds are beyond astronomical that a broadcast, even on a sweeping box, is going to say the word you need at the time you need it with that clarity, while the rest of the time it was it's astronomical. If you think that's a radio station coming through, the next thing you need to do is find out when they're giving away cash and prizes, because your luck is phenomenal. It's just not the way it is. Vocal evidence is also what's considered in research PPO. It's a permanent paranormal object. A lot of times, you go to an investigation, your hair gets pulled, you get poked, you feel something. That's happened to me. But from a research perspective, or trying to even share that or go to somewhere to lecture, you can't convey that forward. But you can analyze audio over and over and over again. You can present it. You can send it to other peers and get their opinions on it. You can even voice print something if you think something said, here's the car, and then you could say, here's the car, and record yourself, and you can look at the spectrograph, and if it matches like a fingerprint, that's what it said. So there's ways to do that. So it's repeatable audio evidence is huge, because you can't just dismiss it because the moment is gone. Like in comedy, there's that whole, you tell somebody what happened at the office, you go, oh, you had to be there. They weren't there. So from a comedic perspective, that doesn't work because you haven't really connected what you're trying to get through to them because they weren't there. This is the same thing, especially when somebody is not with you at the moment to hear it says, Miranda, hi, they're not there.
Exactly. And so what is your thoughts? Because I did have this happen on one occasion where I was over at Hell's Bar Dam in Guild, Tennessee, and it was myself and there was another guy with me. And so we both had our recorders on. I was standing on his left side. He was standing on my right. And we were just walking through the tunnel area and we were having a conversation. And so and neither of us heard this in the moment. On my recorder, it says Miranda, and it was very melodic like that, and it was a male voice. Yeah. And so I didn't hear it till I was reviewing. It was so clear. And so I told him, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to find out where this guy was standing. So did you have your recorder on you? He did. And because he sounded like he was literally between me, but his recorder didn't capture it.
Yes.
How does that happen?
Well, I'll tell you what it tells you.
Okay.
And this speaks to the cynical minded. It's not ambient. It's not ambient sound, because any device in the environment that's recording sound, if it got everything else but that, would have gotten it. Um, so we think, and there's a lot of theories thrown around as to how that might happen, whether it's imprinted on the device, if it's functioning through the consciousness of the user or the operator of the
Okay.
device, the message is perhaps meant for you. That's a difficult thing to know, and I know there's a lot of people on the academic side of this stuff who don't like to say that we don't know so much, and a lot of us do it because we don't really, beyond the shadow of a doubt, know. But there's a level of certainty that gets conveyed with stuff that is damn near saying that you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like to overdo the I don't know factor, but preponderance of evidence there's a lot of, but slam dunk, no shadow of a doubt. Otherwise, that's always difficult to hit that level.
Mm-hmm.
But you get that for one because it's not on both devices. It's not ambient. The other thing is that when you look at certain things, this is an EVP and ITC phenomenon. A lot of the vocals that are recorded are at decibel levels, cadences that are off, sometimes really fast or really slow, that the human vocal tract is not capable of producing. It is
Okay.
below the hertz levels of a human being. So if it's now intellectually responsive to you or your situation, it's not really you believe in ghosts, or really you don't believe in ghosts. It's not a belief thing anymore. Data is king. Data is king. And when you have something like that as your data, and the technical parts of it, those aspects can't be explained away by human interaction, you got something. Even if it was a modulated sound off a radio broadcast, it would have a certain level of tonality if it's detectable by the ear. That's, I mean, AM radio and FM's going past us right now. We don't hear it because it's at a vibrational level until it's modulated down that we can't detect. But it does not mean that sound, by definition, which is a disturbance through the air, doesn't mean that it's not taking place. So those characteristics in that situation would absolutely suggest that that is, by what is currently defined as paranormal, which is outside a materialist Newtonian worldview explanation of how sound would travel, be conveyed, and recorded. It defies that.
Yeah, and that's why, because we literally took those two recorders and put them side by side, played them at the same point. And this was not pulling it off of the recorders. We were playing it from the recorders. So it's not anything that I could have modified at that point. And right at that moment, you hear myself and the other gentleman talking, and you hear it on mine and not on that one. And that's the only time that, I mean, I'm sure it's happened when I've been somewhere before, but it's been the only time that I've literally, been where one, it's called my name, which was kind of fascinating in and of itself. The fact that it was just on my recorder, and normally I listen with headphones while I'm doing stuff just so that I can maybe hear something in the moment.
Right.
And had I heard that, I would have been able to have addressed that and said that, but it was not anything that we could have heard with our own ears at that point. So to me, that was kind of fascinating just because, and that's a great explanation of it. Just in and of how you put that, because I've never had anyone really explain how that would happen.
Thank you, Chris. No, I appreciate it. It's I study all aspects of this stuff because I've had conversations when I was starting out going, well, why aren't there any scientists involved in this if it's legit? And I'm like, and the first time I couldn't answer that question, I went, that's bad that I can't answer that question. This was a while ago. And then I looked at it, and right off the bat, the guy who came up with the term ITC was a physicist. There's scientists on both sides of the issue. There's people who believe it's all psi or psychical abilities. Some people think it's completely biological, biochemical, and it's just us. Some people think everything is a ghost that comes through. And I think somewhere in between a collection of a lot of these different things and studies, I think therein somewhere is where you'll find the truth. But it's fascinating, and it never gets old to try to figure out and determine, because we really don't know all of the aspects of it, and even where it comes from.
Absolutely. So what is the difference in, because you talk about direct radio voice. Is it direct radio voice?
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Thank you.
what is, because that's what the European study?
It's more prominent in Europe. It existed before Frank Sumption and the Frank box. the Frank's box, before any spirit boxes, SB7s, 11s, anything. It was born out of EVP research. Early pioneers in EVP like Friedrich Jurgensen, Konstantin Rodove, they would do EVP and they use different things, even like people do today, water. They would use some kind of a white noise for a little bit of the ambient vibratory tone to give the vocals something that would make them more detectable by our instruments. So what happened was that through some of their sessions, they started getting messages saying that, talking about the advent, and even a lot of the mediums back in the early 1900s or so, 1930s, would get messages about the advent of the electronics age, whereas communication would happen that way. So direct radio voice evolved from that, where it was just running the radio on a barren, empty white noise channel. And some of the best stuff I have ever heard was by an Italian gentleman named Marcello Bacci. He used an old vacuum tube radio. He had conversations like we're having right now. Jules and Maggie Harsh-Fishback in Luxembourg they had a system called a GA1. It had a frequency translator, a field generator. It used a standard like world band, like, AM band radio. I think they had the translator was putting it into an FM band by modulating it up. And it was just, again, it was working off of a barren white noise, not sweeping through the vocals and stuff like a ghost box does. So that's not prominent here because of the American paranormal revolution and what launched it. And everybody should be grateful for, because it is, for the most part, a benefit to all of us that it's not so taboo, is television. And television made it more prominent. But what TV showcased was something that's a little bit more of an instant gratification, with using a sweeping ghost box. And they absolutely work. I named people who build them. I have boxes by all those people. I've gotten phenomenal things out of them. Direct radio voice predates it. When I saw what the Harsh-Fishbacks got, when I saw what Marcello Bacci got, and then my now dear friend, Dr. Annabella Cardoza, who sat with Bacci, she knew Ernst Stankowski, who came up with ITC as a term. And she actually wrote about the author for my first book, Paranormally Speaking. I just talked to her like a day ago. I saw her work and I read her books, and I was looking at what these people did. And I've watched all the TV shows and I've seen phenomenal ghost box stuff. And I'm watching it going, why is nobody doing this method? I know people have tested it and tried it. And there's people who, in some parts of the world, I don't know everybody. So there may be people who are taking a deep dive into this more than I'm aware. But in a decade or so of being in the paranormal, I hadn't met anybody who was doing this as a practice or as a research method with any continuum at all. Mm-hmm. And so I looked at Lourdes. I said, we're buying this big boom box. She called me the LL Cool J of ITC because I had this big world band boom box radio. And we started sitting in front of white noise at least once a week for an hour or two, and just recording it. And then it aided EVP a little bit first, and then it gave a few disembodied, which are what you call, I guess, a direct voice, and then direct radio voice. They started coming out of the radio, and we set it like an appointment. It was the same day, about the same time, every week for almost 3 years without missing 1 week, holidays or otherwise. And that's part of building that ritual and that routine. Yeah. I just couldn't believe that nobody was doing what these people were doing. I said, that's going to be what I do. And
Did you do it in the same location? Did you do it in the same location?
Yeah, I did it at home. Okay. I did it before when I used to live. I actually used to live right next door. And then Lourdes and I moved into a house next door to where I used to live in an apartment. Okay. And then we just continued it here. I mean, if you have the availability of a research facility or somewhere you can go and do it, that's fantastic. I know some people are iffy about doing anything in their home, but if you're not looking at this as the angels and demons and evils and all that stuff from what you see on TV a lot, and you're looking at it from a research perspective, the only way I could do this with any kind of regularity was to do it here.
And was your home known to be active?
Not really. No. And it still isn't. And that's another, I'm glad you brought that up. That's another distinction too, is that in order to determine any location by definition is haunted, you can't do that off of the foundation of anomalous vocals, because I can get them anywhere. I've gotten them here. I do sessions that sometimes during lunch at work, I go in the back office by myself when nobody's around. I'll do direct radio, and I've gotten in crazy vocals and responses out of the white noise. So it's not enough of a criteria to call a location haunted. I mean, can it stir up or create activity? I'm sure it can. so far in about 4 years of doing direct radio, give or take, I have not had anything, and even negative voices or anything coming through is probably less than 5 times in all that
Okay.
time. The malevolence thing is also, I think, a little bit more media hyped because it sells, for TV. But
So
no,
really, it's just more communication, spirit communication, rather than indication of
yeah,
paranormal activity inside of a location, I guess.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the thing too, is that everybody ascribes in the paranormal. I'm big on consistency of thought and continuity of thought.
Okay.
You can't work off of like syllogism logic when you go, it has a table has 4 legs, so therefore, if a cat has 4 legs, a cat is a table. You can't. You have to think beyond that into other possibilities, and you have to have continuity of thought. So you can't just say that it's one thing or another. So
Mhm.
the mindset is different on the European side with this stuff too, where they think that there's stations or ports of call where you actually have communication called like Rio do Tempo, time stream, where they're governed and they're able to communicate using some form of tech. This is a different belief than here, where it's just spirits and entities floating around, and they're stuck here or whatever. And if you ascribe to the no space time limitations
Mhm.
in the realm of spirit, at whatever vibrational level or existence that is, where it's parallel or alternate or whatever, uh, then it's hard to imagine that they're stuck in one location necessarily, unless there's some kind of boundaries that we're not aware of. But
Mhm.
I mean, it would explain a lot of how things happen where we get responses really quickly. It's difficult also from a technical side to look at that. If you understand, when people talk about frequency and higher vibrational frequency for certain entities and lower vibrational ones, and vibration and frequency, especially frequency, is defined, it's denoted by cycles of time,
Okay.
right? You have oscillations
Mhm.
per second or per minute. So if you don't have uh, a measure of time, how do you have frequency? So I think on that level, this is just a theory or a guess on my part, I think that it's just a vibrational level. I don't think it's necessarily exactly frequency the way we know it, because I think it is devoid of space time. I think that's how apports happen, where it used to happen to Marcello Bacci, where
Mhm.
things would pop into existence that were authenticated from where they were from. They were old, they had no degradation, and they would just pop into existence. That could happen. Something could go from point A to point B. We know this even through quantum physics, when you talk about quantum entanglement, where something, two things can be connected without limitations for distance. They can be millions of miles apart. One thing affects one, affects the other. So there's so many possibilities to it. But I think, like, that's I'm big with that, with continuity of thought. You can't say no space time and then say, well, they can't leave here.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me, and could honestly explain why it could honestly explain why that they're like Al Capone is in 5,000 places,
Yeah,
because I can't
yeah.
tell you how many places you go to and you hear, "Well, Al Capone's spirit's here," and it's like, "How?" So, I mean, to me, that makes a lot of sense, especially no place and time. Let's talk just a little bit about some of these different ITC devices. And, when we look at the different ones where you have like the spirit box, for instance, or the sweeping radio with the white noise, and then you have these other boxes that they've done what they can to take the white noise out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that that white noise affects, I mean, aids in that communication and
Yes.
that, okay.
Yes, I do. I don't think it's bad to remove it when you get to the part where you're listening or hearing it. I think you got to be tactical in how you do it.
Hmm.
But there's a theory in how we think that at least I know, I believe this, especially with direct radio voice, when I'm working with nothing but pure white noise.
Hmm.
White noise is a cacophony of several. It's tons of different frequencies within white noise, and what I think is attributing to the vocals that we get is, especially if something's of a higher vibrational thing, I think what happens is there's a theory called stochastic resonance, where within that white noise, if a signal comes in, a source signal, which in this case we'll say, right, hopefully spirit voices,
Hmm.
whatever resonates with that, those two frequencies, those two like vibrations will embolden each other.
Okay.
but they don't embolden the white noise. So what you now have is you have a greater signal to noise ratio, which makes what was not detectable now detectable, which is the source signal, which is spirit voice. Then when you remove a modicum or to a certain degree the white noise, then you're like an archaeologist, you're dusting off the bone that you have now revealed or made detectable to make it more defined and more prominent for the listener or the operator. That, I think, is a big part of how this stuff works. It seems to make sense with a lot of what happens, even with the ghost box stuff, and a lot of the things that they do with the noise pedals and the reverb and stuff. That's all After Effects stuff that's meant to make it discernible, which is, again, the goal of ITC, is to have conversation in real time. So that's a big reason why that those things happen. But I think if it's done after the fact, if it's already had the ability to facilitate vocals through stochastic resonance, I don't think it's bad to minimize the white noise. And it's important to understand how these processes work. Like the sweeping boxes use the phonemes, the allophones, the little fragments of speech to give spirit voice. So they manipulate that to use it to talk. That's the theory. But then you'll see people in the field who will say, hey, just to make sure that this is legit, I'm putting this thing in a Faraday pouch to block all the RF signal. I'm going, why would you do that? If you don't have signal, you're just sweeping white noise, which does not really do anything. You might as well just be on a barren channel like direct radio.
And that's what I wondered. I just saw one of the paranormal teams who was there at the jail. They had released a video, and they had taken their spirit box and put it in a Faraday cage. And I wondered the same thing.
Let me ask you a question. Did they run it to an external speaker outside the Faraday cage?
Yes.
And did they do that by having a wire plugged into the spirit box?
Yes.
That wire is now your antenna.
That's what I wondered, because
so now you're washing your car in the rain. what you're doing, and that's part of understanding how the methodology works. The ghost boxes work fantastic; they really do. Spirit boxes too. You have to have a level of discernment when you do it. You have to use timing and relevance. If it says Miranda coming out of a sweeping ghost box, and it goes, "Oh, that's radio bleed through." Really? Well, you're here, and you said, "What's my name?" So you have to have a level of responsibility and discernment. You have to understand the process, but you can't. When you do that, you put it in there, you run the wire out that. Now you're defeating the purpose of what it's supposed to do.
If it's a wireless speaker, does that still cast? Actually, would a wireless speaker even work if the Faraday cage is actually truly blocking? Would a wireless speaker, if they were projecting it onto or casting it onto a wireless speaker, would that even work?
I would still say you can get vocals through it even if you do that, but it's undermining the methodology is how it's designed to work.
Okay.
That's what those fragments of sound are for. And the interesting part about that is, I mentioned, we talked off camera before the show, on the academia side of spirit research, there's a huge contingency that does not think that ghost box research is legitimate ITC. I don't agree with that because I've heard direct responses come out of it, and I am not a drink the Kool-Aid person. I'm not going to be on team academia. I'm not going to be on team ghost hunter. 100% like people who, and this happens in politics a lot. When you're on that side, whoever's heading up that party, that's who you're for. I'm not like that. I'm discernible with people and processes and everything. So for me, I still think they work. I've seen them work, and I've got evidence of them working. But I like to, like I said to you, I like to understand why people have certain reservations or doubts so that I can either address them or factor them into what I think. They think that one of the problems with it is it's two things. They think it's distracting. They think mentally it's distracting. Like imagine being in, I liken it to, those booths you go in, they have the big fan, it's blowing around cash. You're trying to grab stuff. So imagine if it was all $1 bills, but there was $1 million check, right? You would be it'd be so hard to get that because you're pulled in so many directions. They think that those little fragments of sound that are the little blips, everything that's hitting your consciousness is pulling you in a million directions. Again, discipline, discernment. I think you can learn to listen through that, to that, and work with that, I think. The other thing that they say that it removes free will. Because in fact, to form certain words with certain sounds, you have to have that phoneme, that phonetic, you have to have that sound in place at a certain time in a certain way in order for that to be malleable to, to form that word. And so if you don't have that, you're taking free will out of it. They should be able to use whatever. It doesn't have to be relegated by when the sounds are in certain places. Is that legitimate as a concern? Yeah, but again, there's still elements of this I think we don't 100% know, and I've seen them work. So when something works, I think apps can work. If again, discernment, timing, relevance. If something is so directly connected to your situation or what you asked, if they can manipulate electronics, some of the best evidence ever caught, the hard fishbacks in Luxembourg got with unnetworked computers, fax machines. So I don't think you can rule it out from that.
Absolutely. And that's something, apps are something I want to get into here in a few minutes, because that is one thing. And I know we've got some questions over in the comments here that we'll get to here in a second. But while you're talking about the SB7 and the sweeping rates, I know just for myself, and I don't know if this is an accurate way, it seems to kind of work for me, but you could probably explain this better. So, obviously, because I'll record in several different elements. I'll always have a static camera and audio, and then also my mobile camera that I have with me, trying to get all of that when I'm doing any type of session with a spirit box, Estes method, what have you. But one of the things I know I like to do is I'll pull all of my audio out, because I separate my audio from my video there, and I'll run it through audio software. Now, is it true that when you've got the sweep rates going and you can see the different sweep rates or bands on your audio, if you capture a voice that goes past the sweep rate, does that make sense? That's not within the sweep rate, that could potentially be more than likely some type of spirit communication, because it is going past the sweep rate versus being contained within each of those sweep rate frames. Does that make sense? My question.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're asking is if based on the, like how the boxes will have a 150 or 200 or 250 millisecond sweep rate. If something that you get does not come in just a blip of that, but it goes across at least several sweeps, perhaps, where it spans a longer period of time, that to me speaks to the success of the methodology, because they're coming through, and if the voice or the tonality of it is the same, especially across a few sweeps, that's hard to look at that from a cynical point of view and say, well, that's radio bleed through or broadcast, because you don't have the same voice, even if it comes through a certain stretch, a range of the sweep before it keeps cycling. Because even Frank Sumption said that like a 1 second sweep really is not possible. But if the voice and the tonality goes beyond the sweep, then I think that also speaks to the fact that that's anomalous, because you can't say it's coming from one station while the thing has already cycled through several times, and say that that's just that's 95.5 coming. No.
And that's what I try to look at, but I didn't know if I was sort of wasting my time with that, because I try to sort of validate that and see, because I know that's something that Dr. Sumner and I have had conversations about a lot, because I know they've got some great stuff through the SB7s, and I like to pull that out and use that a lot myself, but I do always try to check myself and just kind of see. I mean, nothing is exact. We don't know anything for sure, but I mean, we can see sound waves there on, the footprint of it. And so I just kind of wondered if that could be an indicator, because I have had certain instances that they have been outside of the sweep rate. And I just kind of figured from what I've seen, if it falls outside of it, that's a little hard to explain.
Yeah. No, for sure. It definitely, if it goes beyond the sweep, then that is definitely something that is an anomalous trait to the recorded audio. Added to the fact that it's also measurable for the decibel level. Well, with direct radio, I run into stuff where things come in at speeds that are just not possible from the human vocal tract to have uttered them. So that's a whole other thing. But you look at those finer points and those details, and that is ways that you can authenticate what you have at least as anomalous. And the thing is, and this is important, and I talk about it, I think, in both of my books so far, is there's a belief from a cynical side of this stuff that the onus is on the person making the claim to prove it. That's true. People in the paranormal a lot of times will get defensive about that, and they don't like that being challenged. But the truth is, that is true. But remember when I said I'm big on continuity of thought, where that from the cynical person's perspective falls short is they don't realize that that also qualifies them. Because when you have anything that you're looking at as possibly anomalous or paranormal as evidence goes, there's only 3 positions possible. 3. And if I'm wrong, I please somebody to say it. It's paranormal, it's not paranormal, and I don't know. That's it. So if I say it's paranormal, yes, the onus is on me to prove that. And if I fall short of proving that, this is not Little League Baseball where the other team wins because I didn't score enough. It remains unknown. Now, if you say you don't know, then we're in agreement it's anomalous. If you are the skeptic or the cynic, and I don't like calling them skeptics, and I'll tell you why. If you're the cynical skeptic person and you say nothing is paranormal, and therefore you didn't prove it's paranormal, so it's not, that's not true, because that same logic that they operate under is if you're making a claim, you have to back it up and prove it. So if you don't believe in anything paranormal, your claim is that it's not. And so that is a shared responsibility to authenticate or not to debunk that thing. And suggesting alternatives is not debunking. Debunking gets thrown around like WebMD throws around headache. It's a symptom of everything. You can suggest, that maybe it was someone in another room. You could suggest maybe it was the Keebler elves and they're under the table. You can stretch plausibility too with that, but alternative possibilities are not debunking. When you show that the sound was somebody's foot and it sounded like an EVP and you got it on camera, that you can debunk.
Absolutely. So talking about apps, we talked about that just a little while ago. So, I know that that's kind of one that can be a little controversial. I know, but, I'm like you. I'm one of those people that it's like, I do have my reasons why I do or don't use certain things. And of course, that's, for me, certain apps would be because I like to know how they're programmed,
Right.
if they are. But then I do feel like as well, so because some apps, they do use your microphone, some do use your GPS. However, it can kind of depend on how you ask the question, possibly, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We had friends that were so skeptical of when Echovox was like everybody was using it. And some people still do. And I've seen that work too. So, I'm a little bit open to everything. We found that a way to get around that is if you were asking the question, to not put the answer in the question. Don't say, can you say red crayon? I'm holding one. You can say, what's in my hand and what color is it? And then if it says red crayon, it's not the microphone because you didn't say it.
Right.
So you can at least, again, using a level of discernment and responsibility, you can at least authenticate something at least a little bit more, because then now you're left with timing and relevance, which is pretty uncanny if that's what you're holding.
Do those have sort of like, because I've had some people who will do like they'll call it like a dry run, where they'll not download the app until they go into the location. Do some of those apps that use microphones, I mean, it is obvious our phone does listen to us when it comes to like Facebook and that sort of thing. You and I can sit and talk about light bulbs. What's even more freaky is when you think about it and then they show up on there. But, you and I can talk about certain things, and pretty soon we'll start to see advertisements, for that on Facebook. Does that same thing work with some of these apps that, maybe your phone is off, you're going to the location, it may not read via the GPS, that sort of thing. But can they pick up maybe on conversation prior to turning on?
I think it's possible. I think with stuff like that, unless you understand the complete guts and inner workings of the app and you can rule stuff out, then you're walking into something bringing your own doubts. And it's okay to be skeptical of a process or a method, but you should know at least the integral workings of the device or the method you're doing. And I think that's the reason. I won't say that the apps can't work, because I've seen some pretty cool stuff come through. And if it's an electronic piece of equipment. I do believe that whatever we're communicating with, whether it's spirit or otherwise, I think they can affect it and they can use it. But I don't think you're going to see the day when there's going to be some kind of a consortium happening over in Europe with any of the societies of psychical research or anything else, where they're going to be having somebody doing a dissertation about an app, that they got on their phone for $3.99 with a cartoon ghost on the icon. I don't think that's going to happen. Doesn't mean the thing can't produce something, but that's the same reason why these people don't ascribe to the ghost box theory and a lot of those big conferences and stuff that they would have in Europe since the beginning of EVP and ITC research really booming, like especially through the 80s, 70s, 80s, and onward, is because they feel like any low-hanging fruit you put in there for the person who's doubtful or cynical is just making it harder for you to get where you want to go with this. So you have to take away as many of those things that they can go, well, it might be that. Because if it might be, then you are a little bit of an indefensible position as far as trying to authenticate what you have. I still think in a lot of cases you lean on timing and relevance. It's really hard to refute that no matter what the device is. But that's why you have to be careful too with something like that. If it can record you and you say something, then you may be providing your own timing and relevance. So
that's true. That's true. And I think that's where all of that, sitting down, not just taking it at face value. One, learning your tools and doing your research, reading books like your books and the books of other folks who, have researched this stuff, and really getting to know your tools, and also spending the time to sit there and look at everything, document everything that's been going on around you, because I'm like you, I typically don't use apps. There have been a couple I've tried that have gotten some interesting results on, and I've seen some, and I'm the type of person that I say, if a spirit wants to use a smoke detector to communicate, they will. We really can't limit them.
Right.
But it's just going and looking, but that is one question we are asked a lot, and it's refreshing to hear, your take on that, and knowing that timing and relevance is probably one of the top key things to look at. I just think we can't limit, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree, and those are the two main governing things for me with anything anomalous that's a voice is timing and relevance, because those two things make it very difficult to dismiss what it is you got through whatever method it is. Again, unless you find out that something can record you and you say the answer and then it says it, then you got to own up to that. That's that you possibly created it because of the device or the method was capable of doing that. Which, by the way, we hear so much people talking about we're scientific. Our team we're very scientific in how we do stuff. Scientific does not mean that you go in trying to debunk everything, and when you can't, then you have something. Scientific means, by definition, science is a method of inquiry, not an ideology. So you're looking for truth. You're looking for absolution. So that's not scientific. If a methodology can be subjected to a false positive, that method by definition is scientific. You have to be able to create a false positive. This is one of the problems on the scientific community with string theory, because you can't falsify it. There's no way to really know that aspect of it, because you can't. How do you do that, right? So being able to get a false positive on a ghost box or on a direct radio voice or an EVP, that does not mean that the method's not scientific, nor does it mean it isn't if you can do it 100% of the time, because that's not even realistic. We hear that a lot too. You got to be able to go into a lab, do it 3 times in a row, repeatability. Now you got something for science. All right. First of all, science is not one guy. That's got to stop. It's in my book. People go, one day science is going to one day. No, science, you don't go to school thinking sex ed is one dude having a lot of luck, right? Nobody thinks that. So science is not one person. It's not one male or one female. There's scientists all around this equation on different sides of it with different perspectives. And to say something doesn't fit into what's accepted and believed is scientism. That's not science. And that's a big difference. It's a cultish, closed-minded mentality. It's very reductionist, Newtonian, old world view kind of. It doesn't really allow for the metaphysical side of things. So that's not. But people will say science, we're very scientific and we're trying to debunk. You go in looking for the truth. And that is, by definition, what a skeptic is. A skeptic is not somebody who doesn't believe in the paranormal. A skeptic is somebody who wants to know the truth. And if somebody says everything is paranormal or somebody says nothing is paranormal, guess what? They are both the same. They're both believers, because that's a belief system. That's a belief system. Except that the skeptic got the well-to-do, educated, well-spoken, more lofty-sounding name by saying skeptic, and then the people who were gullible get the believer. But those are both belief systems, so those are both believers. The skeptic looks for the truth.
I like that. And so I want to get to just a couple questions here before because like I said, Ron has got some amazing audio evidence here that we're going to play. Let me just kind of scroll through. Okay, so wow, there's some great questions here. Let's see here. Okay.
Hopefully I can answer them.
So Steve says, what do you think of doing Estes experiments? Do you think they have too much interference?
I don't know. I'm not sure what you mean by interference. I like it. A lot of places that we go to the Shanley Hotel up in Napanoch, New York. They do that there often. Anthony Simonelli from Seekers Club of the Paranormal does a version of the Estes where he has people in two different parts of the house, headsets with a speaker that comes into the main area. You hear them both. They don't hear any questions. I like it because I think that, especially from the ghost box side of things, part of what people say from the psi mentality initiated evidence stuff is that you heard pareidolia gets also used like a headache on WebMD. You're hearing what you want to hear. So the method I like because I think it takes that out. If you're not privy to the question, you don't have you want to hear. So if you say, what time is it? And I have headphones on and I'm in a different part of the house and I don't hear you and I say 7 o'clock, you can't say I'm hearing what I want to hear. The other part of that pareidolia and hearing what you want to hear thing that I don't ascribe to is that nobody ever accounts for what I call the gaps, right? If you hear what you want to hear, why out of, let's say, 100 times you'll ask a question on an EVP or a ghost box session, why do you hear what you want to hear? I mean, what are the real odds or percentages that we get direct responses? Maybe 7 or 10 out of 100.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that it's these biological tools that are tricking me, or I'm hearing what I want to hear, where's the data to show the physiological and the biological differences within my body at the time I'm hearing what I want versus what I'm not hearing what I want? Because again, continuity of thought. If that's the reason to devalue and discredit the evidence, then you have to have the data to show that that's what it is. Now, do those things happen? Yes. Pareidolia happens. People do mishear things. The artifacts of sound can make you think you heard something. Those things are possible. I don't think it happens at the rate within which it could dismiss all the phenomena. Because at the amount of capture that different people all over do this get, if you were mishearing things at that level, how would you hold a job, a relationship? How would you get through life if your hearing was that faulty? If it was that manipulated? Why doesn't that happen at work? Why doesn't somebody say you're fired and you hear, what, a raise? That's fantastic. Right? Why does so one of the chapters in my second book, Itc Technomancy, has a chapter called Pareidolia, the Paranormal Predator, because all this stuff speaks to this phenomenon. But where's the data that shows how often this happens through other walks of life and in different avenues? Because that's important. And if it really is that prevalent through humanity and life at the level that matches the evidentiary capture and what we think we hear, then that's data we should be looking at, because maybe we're all wrong.
Well, and I kind of feel like too sometimes that you don't have, because anytime I do the Estes method, I always have a camera on me. I always have a camera on the other person in another room, blindfolded, noise canceling headphones. Yep. Sometimes I wonder though, when you're doing these things, if there's, because, you're putting yourself in this sensory deprived state. Right. So some people do tend to, have heightened psychic abilities at this point. I sort of feel like, when you start recording the spirit box session, because some people will put splitters in there and start doing that, does that not sort of discount? Because sometimes I wonder if some of these voices that people hear, if someone is truly in another room or another section of the house and you don't know what they're saying, does that discount the psychic ability that some people get? Because I feel like sometimes some of the things they're hearing may not be on that spirit box, but it might be that white noise aiding them in like a psychic type experience or metaphysical type experience with being in that deprived state.
I think that's a possibility. I mean, there is research in that area. There's a section in parapsychology that they refer to as super psi, where everything would be some kind of psychical message or conveying of a thought form or whatever, and which would explain something like that. One of the issues with that from an ITC perspective is it doesn't accommodate everything across the wide spectrum of what evidence is captured. For one, you can connect psychically. I believe that telepathy, and that is a thing that can happen. They've done experiments where they had somebody in a actual full-size Faraday cage on a glass floor, and their results were below chance, which is what you would expect just by, throwing stuff against the fan. What are your chance odds of results, right? Then they did it on dirt with a metal post stuck in the ground on inside and outside of the Faraday cage, and the results improved.
Okay.
So there is something to that. And a Faraday cage doesn't bounce RF signal or signal away. It conducts it, and by conducting it, it moves it around the area you're trying to avoid it to go to. So people think it kind of bounces it out and back into the environment. It doesn't. It conducts it. So, I mean, your car, if it didn't have windows, would be a perfect Faraday cage because you'd be completely shielded in something metal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's possible. There's a lot of study in consciousness that suggests there's something Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, who's a biologist, calls morphogenic fields. It's a collective consciousness of all things living, past, present, future, kind of like in Star Wars, what they call the Force. Everything's kind of interjoined and connected. I think consciousness has a lot to do with what we receive. You'll go to a country that doesn't have English-speaking radio. You do a direct radio or a ghost box session, and you'll get vocals that respond in the language that you know. That's not explainable through terrestrial satellite radio.
Right.
Plus, you have to show that the person's thinking on the radio wave to be coming through the device. Now, if you're talking about connecting telepathically, that could be a possibility. There is, again, they've done experimentation in that area, and I think it's always going to be an ongoing thing. But consciousness is a whole other ball of wax. I started studying it, and it's just fascinating how much we don't know. Like everything in science, every scientist, every thought, every theory, everything they come out with, right, is processed through consciousness. But we know almost nothing about consciousness. That's ironic that happens. And a lot of the consciousness study and stuff, especially where it pertains to anything supernatural or paranormal, if you look at the old materialist Newtonian view or the accepted worldview of science, they like to say that everything's just biological, everything's biochemical. If you can take a pill that can make you happy, that can suppress or get rid of depression, then that all of these things can be explained through physicality and matter. But it doesn't account for sentience, right? If you look at a car, you can, through physics and matter, you can calculate a drive from one part of the country to the other, and how much gas, how many rotations of the tire, cylinder fire. You can do that all from a physics perspective, but it doesn't account for the why. It doesn't account for the sentience, for the why it's happening, the desire and the thoughts of the person who's operating the vehicle. So I think for us, while there is a physical, biological entity or avatar, however you want to refer to it, in what we are, I think that consciousness is in the driver's seat. And I think it has a lot to do with whether it's psychical, spiritual, or both.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of factors that goes in. Steve also says, and this was actually one I wanted to touch on as well. He says, what are your thoughts on the Ovilus? I use the 5B version and have had lots of facts told to me that I didn't know until further research. And and that's the same thing I was telling you, which my Ovilus 5 is an independent device. And, I was telling you about the experiment that's going to be on one of Ghost Bikers episodes of them calling out the tool that I was holding up. and I hadn't talked about it. I hadn't even pulled it out of the package until I went into the location. So, what are your thoughts on the Ovilus?
Well, it's funny that you asked that. For the first thing, I'll say this, and then this is the immature side of me coming out. But thank goodness that you said it the way you said it, because it drives me crazy when so many people in the field, because of TV, called the Ovilus. I'm using the Ovilus. I went, it's Ovil, Ovil, us, Ovil.
Yeah.
But people say Ovilus, and they say it all the time, and I don't understand. It's just, you just read the word. It's not even, but it's a thing because that's how it's said on TV. So everybody says Ovilus. So I'm glad you said it the right way. That's I actually put that in my
I
book
always
too.
feel like I have an accent when I'm saying it, and like I feel like I'm saying it wrong. But yeah.
No, it's okay to be hooked on phonics. It's all right. So yes, it's Ovilus. That is a device that, again, I think, I know it falls under the bucket of ITC.
Mhm.
It's a third-party instrument. It is electronic. It's an instrument. I think that is one of those things that you have to have a level of responsibility, discernment when you use it.
Yes.
Because the difference between if you run a direct radio session and you're just listening to white noise, or you're in a ghost box and you hear and that's all you got, right?
Mm-hmm.
When something comes through, you assess it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with devices like that have word banks and stuff, and that's primarily, I know that has different modes where you can do certain things with it, but primarily people use the dictionary mode where they're looking for words. Knowing the difference between evidence and results is huge with that device, because it gives you results through environmental influence, probably based on how it's supposed to work. But I don't think you can say with any certainty that everything that thing says, as far as what comes on the display, is spiritual or coming from the realm of spirit or paranormal.
Exactly.
And so you have to, if you said, "What's my name?" and then that showed up and it's not even in the banks, that's impressive. We did a direct radio session one time, Lourdes and I, with Anthony Simonelli was doing it remotely on a video conference from Queens. And her daughter, Lourdes' daughter, had sent us cupcakes. And it said Ron, Anthony, and Cupcake on it. That's phenomenal. That, to me, showed that the device can work. But then if it starts spitting out other things, I was with a group when I first started in California called Para, and they hated it. And I said, "Why do you hate this thing so much?" And they call it the Africa factor. I went, "What are you talking about?" They say, "Because you're using it, and all of a sudden it says Africa." And then everybody runs with the narrative. Africa, what happened in Africa? Did you die in Africa? Are you from Africa? They let that lead the question and answer instead of staying in charge of the Q&A and letting that thing respond, should it respond with timing and relevance.
Well, I'll tell you what really kind of convinced me on that is sometimes I like to go to different locations that I know, they don't have a tragic background. They don't have a story, and kind of test my tools in those locations. And one of them was at my grandparents' farmhouse. And so this farmhouse, 120-year-old farmhouse, I do know there were some people who passed away in there. It's all family. They died naturally. It was, it doesn't have haunting activity in it. At least nothing significant. And so we were going to do a little session over there. And I was sitting my tools out. So I always, when I first go into a place, I always turn my recorder on, a camera on, and then I always, even as I'm unloading tools. And so, that Ovilus, sometimes it'll be quiet. Sometimes it just spits out, 1,000 words a minute, and it's just rolling. But on this particular night, it was quiet. It hadn't said a word. And as I was unpacking, I laid my dowsing rods down. And as soon as I laid those rods down, it said water. And I was honestly kind of blown away by that because the folks, when my great-great-grandfather lived in that house, they found their pond by, by using the witching rods to find water. And so it was almost like, hey, I know what that is. Now maybe I'm reaching there, but to me, that was one of those, I hadn't even said a word and I set the rods down and it says water. That's what they would have known that to be used as.
Timing and relevance. And that's enough to level it up compared to if it had just said yogurt in that moment, which would have meant nothing.
Yeah. And so to me, that sort of was like, okay, so maybe 9 times out of 10, it's nothing. But if you're looking at that situation, like you said, timing and relevance, it's very possible that it could be, could be a tool to use there in the arsenal. So that one
Yeah.
actually really kind of convinced me because, again, no talking going on, and it would be a tool that would be relevant to the early settlers there who had built that house.
Yep.
But I like what you hit on when you talked about it letting you steer the questioning versus it responding to your actual questions that you had. That's a good test.
I was at the Shanley Hotel in Napanoch, New York. We're very good friends with Kelly, who's the owner. She's an awesome person. I highly recommend. Keith Davidson from The Truth About Beer is coming out in a couple of weeks. We're doing an investigation with him at the Shanley.
Oh, nice.
So I was with a group one time, and they were using the Ovilus, and they asked me what I thought, and I told them that story.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think comes up on the screen and the device utters within a minute of me saying that story? Africa. So I don't know. I don't think that has a microphone. So I don't know. I don't know why I did it, but
I'm not aware of it having a microphone. I mean, just
I don't think it does.
Yeah, just because of the way the way it's set up.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead. Let's get to some of your audio that you sent. And
Okay.
so I'm going to
I'll
see.
explain briefly if you want, just before you show it. These are all direct
please.
radio voice clips, and just in short, I know I'm chatty, so in short is very hard for me to do. But I'm going to do
I
it.
love it. I love it.
Direct radio voice is using an empty barren white noise frequency. In its infancy, it's basically just listening to whatever. That's it. No sweeping, no phonetics, no broadcast. Every time I do a session at an event, I let people hear that so they know what I'm working with. It is just the white noise, and then I think, again, that method or the process of stochastic resonance, I think, has to do with how the vocals are able to be emanating from the device. What we do, in part through a gentleman from paranormal.com named Keith Clark, we started using a software instead of just using like the guitar pedals and portals to do filtration or cleaning up the sound in the moment. Because if you, again, circle back to the definition of ITC, which is to have dialogue versus record and review, what we do is where people record voices on a ghost box or EVP, and then they go to software, and then they try to remove noise, clean it up, embolden it like that. So instead of doing that later, we do that in the moment to increase the odds of hearing something in real time versus hearing it later. Will that be 100% real time and nothing in the back end? Probably not. But the goal is to at least swing the pendulum more towards the moment and less towards review to try to have dialogue. So we're using software to filter it live. We're also using an artificial intelligence, which is meant to look for and bring out words or speech. So it's important to note that's why you couldn't use a ghost box with the software to do this, because you would be putting sounds of human vocals and fragments in. You could create something through artifacts or whatever by having allophones and phonemes going through something that's looking for speech. So the empty channel is important, because when I play that for people, they hear it's just white noise. So they know if it was broadcast, you'd hear something.
Yeah.
The third thing, and this is something that I innovated off of the assistance that Keith Clark gave us with suggesting the software to do the filtration versus like a portal, is early EVP researchers talked about, and I said it earlier, the speed and cadence of vocals coming in sometimes so fast that I don't care if you're an auctioneer on cocaine, you can't talk this fast and enunciate and pronounce things so clearly. I had a session one time with Rich Michella from NJPP in New Jersey where all I heard was the word on. Okay. This is where I got the idea to do this. I heard on. When I played it back, I slowed it down to 50% speed, and it says, I said, do you know who I am? And it says Ron. I didn't hear anything else after that. And it says, Ron, it's mom, because my mom passed in 2019. It's Lucy, her mother, who died 2 years before her. I'm connecting. Now, I didn't hear any of that. Now, this speaks to the consciousness part of it. I said, is my mother going to be with me tonight? And he goes, yes, you're lucky. And it had already mentioned her and my grandmother. I didn't hear any of that in real time. It was pronounced as clearly as I am emphasizing now. And it was that fast in real time. So I thought about that, how I missed it. And then I thought about like pioneers like Konstantin Radove talking about how fast things come in. And I thought, what if I could slow it down in real time? So I implemented a plugin into what I use with the software to slow down the rate of speed that the speech is coming in the moment, again, to make it more discernible. And then the last thing I want to connect it to is we talked about having radio signal with how the ghost box relies upon sweeping through broadcast. I don't think that direct radio voice is reliant upon, obviously we're not using vocals, so it's not reliant. I don't think it's even reliant upon signal necessarily. I think the carrier wave that we're using to receive on the device might be forged in the environment. And I'll tell you why. We did with New Jersey Paranormal, with John and Chris, John Ruggiero, Chris Theron, we did the Sterling Mine in New Jersey. Okay. And Rich Richello was with us from NJPP, and he said, let's go further into the mine. So we were below the surface of the earth in a zinc mine. Oh. It doesn't get more Faraday than this.
Yeah.
No cell, no radio, no signal, nothing. We had a power generator. We set up a table. I have pictures of it on my Facebook and stuff. And I got a sound bar, and we ran direct radio voice on an empty shortwave channel below the surface of the earth with zero signal. And I asked them to say John Ruggiero's name because he's the one that hosts the events there. And it clearly says Johnny Zaffis. And named other people and responded to us. So that was a proving ground for me, because now we're getting vocal responses where there's no signal whatsoever, which I think has something to do with either photons of light, because light permeates everything, and I think photons have a wave function like sound, and when it interacts with something, the wave function collapses, then it becomes particle, which again, I think that's where you have your detectable sound. So I think on a subatomic level or on a quantum level, that is how vocals are able to come into the environment where they should not otherwise be able to, because it's not coming in on an RF or a cell signal in the gigahertz range at all. There's no signal.
But so are those waves? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so is the reason that maybe, are the waves easier, do we believe, for spirits to manipulate? Is that why sometimes, we get more voices than we do like apparitions or manifestations? Are those sound waves easier to manipulate, you think?
I don't know if they're manipulating. Maybe, that may be more theoretically what's happening with the ghost box. I think that whatever they're using to come into our environment or to interact with the device, it could be thought form. I believe it might be some kind of a cyclical thought form, which is, a transference or a sending of an energy. And interestingly to me, I think that at some point when our devices detect it and we record it, or it comes through a radio, I think at that point it is in league in some way with what is accepted as rules or laws of physics and nature as we know it. At least at that point when we're capturing it. But the source from where it originates, that's the paranormal aspect of it, because I'm not transmitting out. I'm using a radio receiver on an empty channel. I'm not broadcasting out. So baby monitor, trucker, CB, ham radio, how are they hearing me? When I'm in my living room, when I'm below the surface of the earth in a mine, how is anybody hearing me that's coming through that frequency that it doesn't even have broadcast on it? So I think on some level, I think it's on a quantum level. I think it may have to do with photons of light. It may have to do with, with energy that's part of what people call consisting of like dark matter. I really don't know the answer, but it's got to be happening on some level that is not measurable or detectable, because how does it get our voices to them unless it's through consciousness? And how are they getting into the device to come out?
Yeah. Wow. That's an incredible experiment.
It was fascinating. And the mine was really cool.
Wow. Because I know that's one of the places we were talking about doing an investigation was at a cave, and just because of that isolation and that deprivation, and then also being at that level, that just opens everything to so many different possibilities. Taking so many things out of the equation. We
had a friend, he brought a spirit box SB7 and he hung it by the entrance of the mine so he could get signal to sweep. And then he used an FM transmitter to send it from that box all the way down the corridor into the mine to another spirit box that wasn't sweeping, to see if they could manipulate it through the corridor, going from the one that was getting signal to inside. Nothing. And they said 99% of the time spirit boxes don't get anything in there because there's nothing to sweep through.
Wow. That's brilliant. Wow. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull some of these up, and let's see. You know what? You just talked about the Mom and Lucy connection. I'm going to go ahead and play that one if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. That one was very profound for me, and that was the one that made me think that I need to slow it down in real time because you'll hear me. I sound drunk. That's how slow the audio is, and all I heard was
Okay.
on. I go, it's on. I missed everything else.
Okay. And I was wondering why, when I was listening to these, why you sounded that way. Makes perfect sense. All right. So
Yeah.
what I'll do is I'll play it and then I'll play it through a second time after.
You know who I am? It's turned on. Is my mother gonna be here tonight? You know who I am? It's turned on. Is my mother gonna be here tonight?
Wow.
That's how fast that came in. I missed all of that. And hear how pronounced and emphasized those words were?
Yeah.
I didn't hear any of it except on.
Wow.
That's what made me think I need to figure out how to slow this down. Thanks, Marie. That's what made me think. And then it reminded me of the pioneers that I read about. Thank you, Walter. I appreciate that. I'm a student, and there's people who are intellectual giants that I try to learn from, and I try to factor it into what I think, and it's a never ending fascination for me to do. And that was one of those moments because we got out of that investigation and I was like, I missed all that. Everybody was walking through the location. I was just running the direct radio to set it up to do what we call the digital seance, which is the fusion of the focus of a seance and the human circuit with direct radio voice. And all I heard was on, and I slowed it to 50%, and that was all there. I was like, all right, now I know why Radove said that the speed and cadence which the vocals come in is faster than the human vocal tract can do.
Uh-huh.
And I got to figure out how to slow this thing down. And then I did. And now I've not had to slow it down to 50% anymore in review. Even if I miss something, I don't have to slow it down to find it now for the most part.
Wow. Okay, so the next one we're going to do is Family James Anito.
So everybody, for the most part, I think a lot of people know who James Anito is. We love James. James is a brilliant investigator. He was with us at the Rochester Paracon a couple months back, run by Ted Von Son, who we love. And he had heard about what we were doing with Direct Radio Voice. He was having conversations with Tim Woolworth about it. And if you're interested in ITC, you need to listen to Tim Woolworth. That guy is brilliant. His body of work speaks for itself. He's iconic in ITC, in my opinion. I don't think I'm wrong. So they were talking about it. So James was curious to see what we were doing. So we said, we're going to run direct radio in the hotel room. Come by later. So we had a female voice coming through. It answered questions. It gave a first and last name. He was there at the time. His girlfriend was pregnant, and he had his son with him, who's adorable. And so what it says speaks to a new family, and it says his name while he was in the room. And I played it for him the next day because we heard it in the moment, but he wasn't sure. So we played it from the next day, and his name is not common to begin with, to be coming through. And then even how we often speak where we'll drop syllables, like his name is Anito, and it says James Nito. But a lot of times if you say his name to somebody, you go, James, you don't always go, oh, Nito. You'll just say James Nito. If you say it quick enough, and that syllable in the beginning drops. So that's what it sounds like, but you'll hear it. It was he was in the room and asking questions, and then that happened.
All right, here we go.
James.
What did you say?
James.
What did you just say?
Wow,
That's chock full of timing and relevance. He was in the room. It said his name. He was with a different family because he was having a child. His other son was with him. It's and again, that was before I was slowing it down. I mean, before in real time, so that was slowed down in review too. And I started finding older recordings, recent but older, that sounded like that. When I slowed them down, I went, you know what? If I have to sound drunk on a recording, I'm okay with that.
It adds character. All right, so let's see here. We've got let's see, Ron, Tony, and is it
Bocce?
Bocce? Okay.
So this one's interesting. I'll give you a very short version of the story.
Okay.
Tony Rathman in Arizona, who's one of the co-hosts of Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence, and we do Monday night on the UNX network. It's me and Lourdes Gonzalez, Tony and Sheree Rathman, Chris Allgood and Audra Keeler, and I love every one of those people. They are really quality, Class A people, 1,000%.
Great podcast, by the way, too.
Thank you. Yes, and one of our best shows was with you.
Oh, well, thank
and the
you.
Sumner and Team Sumner too.
That's right.
So we did a live show, and Tony ran his Evox, and I ran direct radio voice. And I love he talk about somebody who makes ghost boxes that are silent, and his stuff is phenomenal. He makes such good stuff. Another guy I think so well spoken, so brilliant. That he was enamored after that show that direct radio voice said his wife's name. It repeated Chris Allgood's signature closing line, "Stay haunted," when I asked him to. So he's like, "You got to show me how to do this." So I set him up. I got him with Keith to get the Keith card to get the software. So he got all the right components. I helped him set it up and configure things. He started running direct radio voice. Less than 2 weeks after that, I do this session. In the beginning, there was this kind of harmonic kind of a sound. And I didn't know what it was. And I'm making faces like, that's weird. I never heard it. So the first thing they say on this file, on this evidence file, is they say, "Our music, sorry."
Oh, okay.
Then it says something about only dealing with people like you, meaning me, asking me about spirit. And then it says, and not to give it away, but it says something about Tony being my friend. And so there was a back and forth. I responded, and then they responded, or the female responded to me. And it sounded to us like they were trying to say, "Hey, this guy's connecting the way you do. Is he cool? Is that all right?"
Oh, okay.
Because it was not even 2 weeks after he started doing it.
Okay, cool. We'll get that one playing.
Hey, Tony's my friend. I would agree. Can you say Entity Voices?
Okay, that was. Oh, let me pull you up there.
That's from my second book. That's Marcello Bacci with a vacuum tube radio. It was in Normandy, if I'm not mistaken. I have one similar to it. So he's a legend. He's one of the greatest in evidence capture in ITC of all time. So when it said, and Tony Rathman has since gotten stuff that mentioned Bacci as well as listening or watching or helping or whatever too. So just to give that little relevance. Is that crazy? Yeah. When it responded, Tony's your friend, and I said Tony's my friend, and then she says yes, and I'm thinking that's a commentary, and then she goes, "I'm asking." What? I would agree.
Very intelligent.
So yeah.
I mean that was one of the parts that I thought was the most phenomenal, was where she's, confirming, but I mean, she's not confirming, but she's asking, and then it's like, no, you're not getting what I'm saying. This is what I'm asking.
Yeah. That was a huge moment for me doing this, because it was interactive. There was back and forth, and then it qualified the statement, because I guess through consciousness or I don't know if they can see me, but I was like, why are they saying he's my friend? And she goes, I'm asking. And then we're like, maybe they're saying this guy's doing what you're doing the way you're doing it. Is that cool? Is he cool? And of course he is. But that's what we thought as an explanation. I mean, I don't know for sure what the intent was behind that, but that's what I thought.
Well, it's communication and conversation direct. So let's see. The next one is orange beverage.
So this one, that's perfect that you picked that one, because I just mentioned a second ago about, I don't know if they can see me. I think sometimes they can. I don't know how we're perceived from wherever they are or how it happens as far as visual acuity goes. But this was, as I mentioned earlier, I do this at work sometimes. I'll find a quiet area in the back on lunch and I'll run direct radio while I'm writing or whatever. So I had a beverage. This one's blue. Sometimes I use flavors just so I don't eat sugar. And I had one that was orange, and I was wondering if they could see it.
Oh, okay. All right, here we go.
Can you see the color of my beverage or no? Can you see the color of my beverage or no?
Wow.
So that was convincing to me that at least on some level, and I don't know if it's all the time, we've had them name the color of the couch before and stuff when we did direct radio sittings and stuff. So there are instances when they have been able to speak on visual elements of our environment or what we were doing. And so huge too, to point out when we were talking about EVP earlier, that's just the white noise. And I'm just filtering it like people do in review in the moment. It's just the white noise. So there's no, like EVP, it's like it's one step north of that impurity. That's why I love it, because you can't say that that's broadcast.
Exactly. And so do you have a hard time hearing or understanding? Is that something that took some time or
listening to it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all this stuff has a learning curve. I think the cynical types will say that that's almost they'll look at it like it's a cop out, saying, "Oh, well, you have to have an educated ear and you have to, But it's true, because we have consciously, through visual and audible information or data, we have what's called inborn pattern recognition. This is something that's studied in consciousness. If you flew over a terrain that you'd never been on before, you would pick up nothing. You really wouldn't have any frame of reference. Second pass, you'd start picking up reference points, and each time you went over it, you'd be able to start putting more of something together. That's pattern recognition. We have that. That's part of what they blame when they say stuff visually for being apophinia or pareidolia, where you're seeing patterns or looking for what you want to do. So we do learn that way, and it is different listening to a phonetic box or listening to a spirit box or ghost box that sweeps, and listening to this. This has less distraction with sound, because for the most part you don't hear anything verbal or audible at all. Sometimes we'll hear what sounds like Lourdes calls the voices when there's many, and that's, again, as far as we're concerned, inexplicable, because there's no broadcast on the channel. It's completely barren of all radio emissions. So
I am not sure. My cat is, stop that, is trying to scratch something over there. Speaking
Happens.
of audio sound, let's see. And of course, like you just said, it's almost like the reason they do street signs the way they do, because we're almost reading in a pattern of the way the word looks, versus because we may be too far to be able to see what it is, we can see the pattern and be able to recognize. So that makes perfect sense. Let's see. This one is I'm happy for you. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Yeah, so the one thing I can deduce from this one that is very possibly an Italian relative of mine.
Okay.
Because that's a phrase that they would say often.
All right, here we go.
It wasn't a response to anything, but it was on an empty white noise channel that it was just filtering the noise away. Again, stochastic resonance, form the vocals, strip it away, reveal more of it. Boom, this comes out. Italian people say that a lot. And that was the boombox radio, by the way, in the background that was running at that time.
I like that. Because you can't see it in here, but I have a big boombox that from the 90s. I need to convert mine into that.
So that's we can talk about that off camera, because I don't want to distract from what you're doing. But that's a huge distinction too. Direct radio voice is a method. It is not a device. It is not a box. And that is that's a hurdle to clear, because people are so accustomed to ITC being a box or a device from what's mainstream, which is spirit box or ghost box stuff. It's not. It's a method. Can you get a direct radio voice out of a sweeping device? You can, but it's hard to qualify it as being a direct radio voice unless you can tell. See, Marie knows. Unless you can tell that it didn't use. I know Jay Prather, who makes tremendous boxes. I have one of his direct links. If he's running echo and reverb through the device and the voice comes through, but it doesn't have echo and reverb to it, you could assume that that's a direct radio voice, perhaps, because it's not using something that is coming through the mechanisms of how the sweep is going through. The sweep is using echo reverb. That voice did not. But that's if you're qualifying evidence as being a direct radio voice. But DRV, or direct radio voice, is primarily a method, and the methodology does not include using a sweep. That is a big point of contention in European research on ITC.
Gotcha. And thank you for clarifying that, because that's huge. Let's see. This one is, let's see. Let Lourdes touch mask.
So this is very recent. Again, Shanley Hotel. Scotty, the medium from New Jersey, who's phenomenally so talented. And he's hilarious. He, I guess, through people who got this mask and somebody didn't believe in it and bad things happened, and you know how those stories go. He ends up bringing it to the Shanley. So it's encased, and it's in this back room that used to be just like storage and junk, and they're turning it into a seance room. So gradually they're renovating, and so they do sessions in the room. They'll do Estes experiment stuff in there. But for the most part, it's still a work in progress. So this mask is in there, and it's in that room. Everybody that we know, including Sam Baltrusis, John Zaffis, Lourdes, a lot of people who've been in the room with that mask get a really bad feeling. When they took it out of the case, we were there with Sam and Johnny, Zaffis and Lourdes, like those people got up and left the room.
Okay.
Like, there's something really bad about that thing. Don't like it. So Lourdes had some kind of a problem with an attachment not that long ago. So she's back in the saddle doing event stuff again. And I think something there that was not attached to the mask, I think was trying to say, oh, let her touch it. She could probably take it out of here.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
Again, this is a direct radio voice too.
Wow.
That's comfortable.
Right? So
Yeah.
did she touch it?
No, she would not. She would not anyway. She would not. I think it falls into the same reasons why Tony Sparrow doesn't let people touch Annabelle, because I think, like he says, you're mixing auras or you making contact with it. I don't think that's good. I think no bueno, which is Spanish for no bueno. Don't know.
Wow. I mean, that was clear.
And that's just pure white noise again. That's just direct radio voice. That was phenomenal.
Yeah.
We were a little stunned when I heard it.
And I mean, in the moment, I mean, if she was right there with the mask, I mean, that's the
It was in the
time.
next room. It was in the
Okay.
next room. Yep.
Okay. This one is log 137 called out.
So this one's cool. This is it's not a longer file. It's basically we've been doing 200 and some. We've done sittings every week, like I said, for a couple of years, and I always open the session recording. I do the sitting. I'll say what frequency, what I'm running, etc. She'll put the moon cycle, the temperature, barometric pressure, whatever. We log all the data, and we always ask for them to say, "Can you tell us what session it is?" We always try to get them to repeat one thing, because that shows we're being heard. That shows contact. Even if everything coming through is paranormal, we want that timing and relevance of a response.
Mm-hmm.
So not before 137, and trust me, not since, has anybody given us the number of the sitting since. But that one time, and you'll hear another male go, "Wow, it's clear." That was Anthony Seminelli. He was on Google Duo on the phone on video conference.
Okay.
And he heard it, and we both heard it.
Okay. Here we go.
If you can hear us, can you say log 137?
Would you be kind to repeat the log number 137, please? Like that we know you're listening to us, that you can hear us.
Yes!
I said it.
137 in a row. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was very clear.
Wow.
That's nuts, right? Direct response, repeated it. No broadcasting out, no microphone, no. I have no explanation for how that happened. It was here. It was right here where it happened. And they won't do it again. They have not done it again. They're going, nah, did that.
Moving on.
Yeah. Hasn't happened.
Wow. And see, to me, that speaks volumes. You know, the things that you don't, I mean, it's the things that you don't get that validate those things that you do.
Yeah.
You know.
Well put.
Okay, this one is NJPP. Herb, are you there?
So Rich Michelle's group, New Jersey Paranormal Project, brought us in. They did a preliminary investigation at a residence in New Jersey. I think the property was at one point all part of a greater farm and a larger estate from the Ballantine beer company from back in the day. And so this one family have an activity, nothing really malevolent from what I understand, but they did a preliminary investigation and they wanted to see if they could get some kind of contact and some vocal stuff. And since Richard's worked with us so much and he's seen what we've done with direct radio, he wanted to bring us in and see if we could run somewhat of a digital seance thing and see what we could do. We got a lot of stuff that night. The family laughed and cheered. A light switch got turned off behind the lady. It had to have been, the switch was physically turned off. And I could see everybody in the room. So I don't know how it happened, but it was actually switched off. They asked personal questions, got answers to stuff that, the grandfathers or whatever would say. This one, I believe, what was the title of this one again?
Let's see. Herb, are you there?
So this one was I think this was a response from the name that's in the voice. Name somebody who was part of the older history,
Okay.
not one of the current residents of the house, but the name was valid from the history.
Okay.
Herb, it's Renee. Are you there?
Wow.
So there was an Alex in the history of that property that lived there, and a family that did have children. So I don't know. We don't know who the female voice was, but the name Alex did have a place in the history of the house.
Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Let's see.
While you're pulling that up, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say we did a digital seance at the New Jersey Paraunity Expo. We run an ITC exhibit the last 2 years, and I had people put their phones by the speaker to record because we had something happen the year before that was mind blowing. I actually have it in the third book I'm writing now. What happened in the 2021 and then the 2022 Expo that had to do with the same guy, and we didn't know he was there the second year, but it came through. And I had a couple of people. A girl sent me a message on Facebook the next day that two of them sat in the back of the room. They didn't ask any questions, but she recorded it with her phone like I said she should. They go in the car and they play through the Bluetooth, and a brother-in-law who died in a motorcycle accident less than a year ago said his name in his voice. Now, I don't know the voice to identify it, but she sent me the part of the file so I didn't have to go looking for it, and his name is there.
Wow.
So that was really interesting to me too, and that's we've had a few instances. The third book is called the Digital Seance Initiative. We've had a few profound where we've had a life-changing something for somebody who was there. We had a teenage girl in Pennsylvania who cried, getting direct responses that her grandmother would have known. We've had a few instances, and two of them actually that happened at the Jersey Expo, where somebody who had lost somebody close to them came through, and there were tears and stuff. It was difficult, but rewarding to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
For somebody.
And that's the thing. I saw a comment over there in the comments just a little while ago talking about how that can help, how your tools there can really, and your research can help a lot of different people out.
I appreciate the comment, and that's something that we started finding out. Marcello Bacci, who I mentioned before in Italy, he would do sittings every week or month. I forget how often he did them, and most of the people who came were parents who lost children at a young age.
Oh.
And they would have little apports, little things would pop into existence under their chairs during the session. Nobody couldn't sneak it under their chair. They're sitting there. The voices of their children would come through. And he got investigated to the nines, that repeatability thing for science and shielding RF signal. He did all that. So all those hoops have been jumped through. It is of my opinion that if one argues the authenticity of ITC research and doesn't mention his name, that's like leaving the smoking gun at home when you go to court. He's completely irrelevant to that. He jumped through all those hoops. But that was what he did. He didn't charge people for any of this stuff. He just helped people. And we started doing this in different places. And then what started happening was profound, meaningful moments of solace or closure for people started to happen. We had two of them happen at the expo in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago. We did 4 sittings. In 2 of those sittings, happy birthday came out unsolicited. In both of those 2 sittings, there was somebody in the room celebrating a birthday we did not know. It did not happen in the other 2. The Pennsylvania situation, when the girl cried because of her grandmother saying things, that's hope. That's what we're hoping comes out of this digital seance initiative thing is some really cool stories and maybe providing some kind of service or help, that people will appreciate it.
And what a wonderful end goal for that. Let's see. This one is the Shanley Hotel 3 a.m. books.
So this one was, this is before I started slowing it down, but you'll hear a lot. This Rich Michelle from New Jersey Paranormal Project was with us. He had, I think it was his second or third book. I think his second book, Spirit Voices, which is awesome. He asked me to write a section for it. He did an interview with me in it. So we both had contributed to that book, but obviously his book. He didn't sign them, but he gave some away.
Okay.
So it mentions that you'll hear a voice come through. It mentions books. It mentions not being signed. It names the time. That's exactly what time it was when they said it. And I repeat them slowed down, but this was very relevant and very well timed, all of it. And there was more, but this was the part that was really significant, so I clipped this piece separately.
Okay.
And there's a little exposition here in the beginning that just explains it. And neither of us signed his book. Most notably him, it's his book, but none of it was signed. And that is the Shanley Hotel for everyone. A must. A must.
Yeah. Yeah. Why are you always up there?
3 a.m. That's what time it is.
Why are you always up there?
I think most important thing to take away from that clip is that if in death you can bring Claritin, do, because allergies they come with you.
So do you think that would that have been a residual thing, or?
I don't think so, because it was intelligent. It spoke to stuff that was very specific for that moment. It spoke to books. It spoke to the time. Residual was kind of like a recorded playback, and I don't think that would have noted the time exactly at that moment.
No.
Right. What a couple people, I forget who it was that we know, that's a very talented medium, thought that it was, well, actually it was Johnny Saffis, if I'm not mistaken, thought it was Sal, who was the original owner for a long time, saying that. He would have said that as somebody who, ran the place and did events, said, hey, you sign your books, and, well, I'm going to sleep, can't keep my eyes. I mean, it sounds like it could be him. I mean, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's...
I love how it was just a casual conversation that you and I could have been having at 3 a.m.,
Yeah.
about being tired or allergies, I love that.
That's another distinction with this too, that again, like I try apps, ghost boxes, like I have everything. I love all this stuff. But there seems to be a lack of limitation with the length of the messages or the conversation, with the openness of direct radio voice, that I think that there's more of a brevity to the messages with a sweeping radio. That's just my experience. There are people getting phenomenal results with ghost boxes. Some of them getting longer messages than others. But we've had numerous things like that, or even longer multi-minute conversations that, or back and forths that went on, where the connectedness of the moment doesn't feel like it's severed until you shut down.
Gotcha. Gotcha. More where some of the others almost seems coincidental sometimes that, you just
Yeah.
happen to connect in that moment rather than an actual making a connection and then, like you said, ending the conversation.
Right.
Let's see. This one is the Sterling Mine with Johnny Zaffis. Is this
So
the mine you were talking about?
This is the one. Yeah. So Johnny wasn't there, but it was Lourdes's birthday weekend, and she really wanted him to be there. And he, around the Northeast area, because he's in Connecticut, has been known. I've been there before to just pop in, especially with a lot of the teams or people who run events and places who know him, who have a good relationship with him, and then we all love him. And he'll show up sometime. So she was hoping maybe he'll show up this. So this was a private event that New Jersey Paranormal, John Ruggiero and Chris Theron threw together for Bob and Sandra from Barefoot Paranormal, a few of us, Rich Michella, and we had just the mind, just us. They do public events there, but he invited us on an off time on a weekend to just run amok and have fun with it. So I was trying to get his name under the surface of the earth, where we got Rich's name and a bunch of other responses, but it names Zaffis. And this is one of Lourdes's favorite pieces of evidence because he was on her mind earlier, at least. I don't think it was her thought form coming through. And there's reasons I believe that, especially when it's coming through the radio. A lot of that super psi causality explanation for a lot of the vocals doesn't always explain it, because you would have to suddenly have the capability of speaking in languages and dialects and jargon and terminology and experiences and locations and stuff that you didn't have before. So if it's psychical ability and the telepathy that's coming out of you into a radio, a lot of these instances you would have to have acquired all that knowledge and then spit it out on a broadcast frequency that's empty. I don't know that there's data to support that possibility, at least to that level.
Gotcha. All right. We'll go ahead and play this one.
Somebody say John Ruggiero, please. He's been here before. Could you respect and acknowledge him by saying John Ruggiero? That was the setup I had. It was Rich Michella's table. She'd be a millionaire. We would be millionaires then. But yeah.
I love Lourdes.
Yeah, she's funny. Yeah, she gets excited like a child every time this stuff happens. It makes it even more fun because she acts like it's the first time she's heard it when she hears something that meaningful come through or clear. There's a chapter in my first book, I think it's only the second book, called "So I Was Jealous of a Radio," because of the first time she heard a direct radio voice, she hugged the radio with passion. I was like, hey. But that was phenomenal. There's no radio signal, no cell signal, no nothing. We're under the surface of the earth. It's a zinc mine. Everything's shielded. I got a power generator thing that runs, charge. I'm plugged in, and I'm running an open channel, just filtering it. And then that came through, amongst other things. It was crazy.
And that was a great setup too, by the way. I mean, I can't imagine being set up that far under the earth. Were you guys under there for quite some time?
Yeah, we were in there for quite a few hours. There's an area closer to the surface, and we would leave to go to the structure on the property across from the entrance, which was what that opening shot was, the entrance, where they had a bathroom. We could have like snacks or whatever. And she had just bought me for events and stuff a wagon, and it was raining that day, and it could not have been a better time because it was all ramps. But you walk into the mine, and there's all these pathways, and water's dripping down in some spots, whatever, and there was an underwater spring which looked just like majestic, this beautiful blue like this, like the water. So I was traipsing through the mine with the radio and the sound bar and the whole thing, and then we set everything up on the table, and I plugged the computer in, and it was nuts. But what a proving ground to be able to go somewhere where there's no signal and no reception and get vocals. I mean, that was what we were hoping for. And thank God, that Rich Michella thought to say, hey, let's go further into the mine and not just in the area where the employees would congregate before they worked, which already had no signal. But he goes, let's really go in. And he brought the table and we wagoned our way in there and set all that up.
That's awesome. And we've got one more left. And that is, let's see here.
Which was the last one.
White Hill, Nobody Cares, Mary.
So this is fairly recent. So in the Shanley, we had done one of the first few Digital Seance Initiative sittings, and we had Johnny Zaffis was there and Sam Baltrusis. It was close to the time when the war in the Ukraine and stuff started, and a lot of people thought that a lot of the agony and voices that were coming through, and it was a female, were spiritual and rooted in that. And if you go back to the no time space limitations, it's a possibility. Johnny Zaffis was standing by the speaker and he kept looking at everybody going, are you not hearing that? Am I the only one hearing this? It was unbelievable. Sam heard it. So Sam wanted to start doing digital seance things with us. So we're doing the Mass Paracon with him. So he's got Patty Negri doing the seance the one night, and then the next night's the digital seance with us. Zaffis looked at me before we closed the session out, and he goes, in my whole career, he goes, I've never heard anything like that. And we had this whole discussion about quantum mechanics and this whole thing. He's a brilliant dude. But he was enamored with what came through. And Anthony Seminelli kept teasing me, going, you freaked out Johnny Zaffis. You freaked out a demon out. I didn't do anything. It's what it yielded. And the funny thing is that when we stopped, I didn't shut the radio off or sever the connection. I muted the Bluetooth soundbar. That was it. We turned it back on a couple hours, hour and a half or so later, and what was coming through and the tonality and the feeling was completely different. Okay. Same channel, same everything, same connection. So I don't know what it was, but it was profound. It moved a lot of people. It became uncomfortable. It was really, you could hear the pain and the agony. And he talked about it. He went live on Facebook sometime after that, and he was talking about it. It was surreal.
Wow. Okay.
But White Hill Mansion.
Sorry?
That's what this is.
I'm sorry. That? No, go ahead.
I realized I went on about the Shanley thing. So this is at White Hill Mansion. This is in Fieldsboro, New Jersey. This is Lourdes and Sam Baltrusis and Richard Michella sitting at a table as part of a seance. And then I'm running direct radio concurrently at the same time. A lot of what Sam said that he got and spoke came out of the radio either before or after he said it.
Oh, nice. And
this is responding to him speaking to who was the wife of the house, I think, historically, early on. There's a story that she may have been involved in the murder of her husband through a servant. So that's who he was reaching out to with this. Okay. The place was built in 1723, so this is 53 years before this was the United States.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mary, is that you?
Yes. Who heard that? I heard that. Holy shit.
Sweetheart, do you want me to tell your story?
Whoops. That was almost heartbreaking with the nobody cares.
Yeah, nobody cares. And the interesting thing about the river is that the story that she possibly was involved with the murder of her husband was he was out on a boat on the river, which is right behind the property. You could actually walk down to it. And he drowned, supposedly. But there was a lot of speculation, or at least from the historians there who we've spoken to, who say that she may have been instrumental in that actually being a murder. So to say that the secret's in the river was interesting because that would be where it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could hear a lot of emotion in that, or I felt like I could from that end. And again, just the fact that it was relevant to the location in the conversation.
That's the charming Tony Rathman.
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that we talked and I got him started and he's doing direct radio voice. He's one of those people that I feel like this belonged in the hands of. I mean, anybody who wants to do it can do it. You just literally can start out with a World Band radio. But this is somebody who's been doing spirit communication through ITC methods, primarily ghost boxes that he built for a decade. And he gets great stuff. He has an amazing connection to spirit. And so I felt like for him, a lot of the building blocks that you have to put in by doing the time, he already had. He understood it. He has a great ear for it. He's got a good heart and soul as people go, amongst the best. So I thought this was going to be really a good fit for him. And so far, some of the DRV stuff that he's shared, it's like, that's some good stuff.
Nice.
So I'm proud of him and what he's doing with it. He's a very talented person and a very smart man. And he's going to do big things with this, I think. Thank you for sharing that. Those are book 1, Paranormally Speaking, Knowingly Talking to the Unknown. It's got some stuff with how I got involved with the paranormal when I lived in California and moving back to New Jersey. I addressed a few things I thought that the field needed that may not be in a lot of books because this used to be taboo. And a lot of the stuff that existed socially at the time when the paranormal was, rarely seen on TV, didn't exist. Like, there's a chapter called Parasocial Media and Behavior. It just talked about holding yourself to a standard of some kind of integrity and not bashing people or going after people or trouncing on other people's stuff, and having a level of respect and holding yourself to some standard, even if somebody is subpar as a personality or as an entity in the field goes, you don't have to sink to that level. You hold yourself to a certain standard. Bringing your children into it, doing it as a couple versus not. Some people, when they're away from their significant other, that's time and money that's not spent on the collective that they have in the relationship. Whereas with Lourdes and I do this together, it does in a lot of ways make it easier because everything we buy or do or go to is a shared expense. It's a shared experience, and it's all, a together thing. So it speaks to some of that. The Technomancy book, the second one, I get a little bit more into the philosophy, a little bit more into the methodology. I show some of the direct radio voice setups from when I started with just the boombox to what I'm doing now. There's a feature chapter in there called TRV, which is Tony Rathman Voices, because I wanted to put something in there just because I think what he's doing and what he's going to do is fantastic, and I love the guy. So I put that, and there's a chapter in there about Keith Clark from varanormal.com. That's Vara with a V. That looked like a W. That's more like a V. Because Keith Clark is a pioneer. He's an amazing individual. He's brilliant. And he was the person who introduced us to the software to filter live versus trying to do it with guitar pedals. And I think he made a measurable difference in what we were already doing. And it's got just some more stuff. It talks about things like biocentrism and a little bit more of the philosophy of what's going on, the function of light and photons and how I think that may be a part of it. The next book, I may touch on other stuff like 0-point energy and stuff like that, but it's a little more technical, a little more philosophical. That's more my platform. From the background in comedy and being a satirist, as well as not being a ghost box builder, I have a different perspective. While I still have a great appreciation and love and respect for the people who are the builders, fundamental and huge in this community. But that's not my background. So I think I have a different platform philosophically. I like a para-anthropological, which is kind of like a paranormal anthropology approach to it. Also, consciousness, it speaks to a little bit. So it's two different platforms for the books. The third book will be Digital Seance, where I'll chronicle some of the stuff that we've been doing with it. So thank you for showing that.
Absolutely.
Tremendous on that. I really appreciate it.
And in the show notes, I've got the links to where people can get the books. I'm actually going to pull that up here on the screen now. Let me pull that up here. That way it will have a direct link here in the comments as well. Because it's fascinating. And I could have absolutely sat and talked to you for much longer. Let me pull this
I appreciate that. I'm tired of me after 2 hours, I'll be honest.
let me pull that screen up here. Whoops. Got multiple screens going on. Okay, here we go. And is the best place to find find those on Amazon?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I bring them to the events now. We're going to be at the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash in a week. So I will have books there. I'm actually speaking. I'll be speaking on my own or with Lourdes and I probably next year. But I guess, and we're friends with Pam and Steve Barry. They do this for the troops. The money goes towards the troops and soldiers. They're also, again, like John and Chris from New Jersey Paranormal. They're beautiful people. And they didn't realize, I guess, that I would have been excited to speak there. So the roster was filled. So I don't know if you know, and you should, Chris DeCesare, the ghost boy at Geneseo. So
I don't.
Chris, so they did a whole thing on Sci-Fi Channel on him and his dormitory haunting and stuff. He is, you have to know him. He is one of the most kind and beautiful souled people I've ever met. So he talked to the Barrys at Gettysburg and said, "You got to get him on the roster. He's got a voice that needs to be heard." And they're like, "We would love to. We didn't know he wanted to do it. We could do it next year." And he goes, "I'll split my time with him."
Oh, wow.
So I'm speaking with him, which is kind that he would even do that.
Yeah.
And secondly, an honor for me, because if you ever get the chance to watch this guy speak, he tells his story of the haunting he experienced in the dorm and a lot of the stuff that happened throughout this whole story. And I've never seen, you know how you watch a movie and over again because you like going back into that world and being with those characters and kind of feeling that whole thing again? His lecture is like that. People come to see him because they know who he is. People come to see him who have already heard the story again and again and again because the experience with him is mystical. It's just unbelievably good and touching that people just keep coming back to see it. He's a phenomenal speaker. So to share time with him was a huge honor to me. So I'm excited about being up there with him doing this. He's a look him up, please. He's really is
I
one of the,
definitely will. Definitely will.
It's somebody to have on too, maybe.
I would love to.
He's funny. He's brilliant. Yeah, him and Anthony Seminelli are in Lourdes and I's opinion, two of the kindest people we've ever met.
Wow. Well, we've got the links there in the comments, so those will show up whenever the show rebroadcasts on my Mix TV as well as YouTube and LinkedIn and here. So I definitely encourage everyone to go on, check out Ron's books because, like I said, I feel like we've had a phenomenal conversation tonight. And I mean, with what you're talking about, you're right. That's a voice that needs to be heard and a topic that needs to be talked about more. I feel like it really enriches the research that people is doing, and I feel like it can also really help folks, especially with what you're doing with your tools and doing these digital seances with everyone. So yeah, definitely if you want to learn more about it, go on, check out Ron's books and go to the bash and listen to you speak.
The bash is going to be fun. We're actually going to be face to face because our podcast is Lourdes and I are in New Jersey, Tony and Sheree are in Arizona, and Chris and Audra, who used to be in Arizona, are in North Carolina. So we've never actually been in the same room with Chris and Audra, but that's going to happen for the first time at the bash in a week. So we're super excited about that.
Face to face?
No, not Chris and Audra. It'd be the first time. Tony and Sheree, we saw them in Vegas at the Paracon, and then they came out here a year ago, and we did a 4-mansion tour. We set up 4 nights in a row. It was exhausting, but it was great. So we've worked with them twice, but we've not met Chris and Audra yet. So,
and I'm also putting the link here in the comments to the Entity Voices podcast, because if you want to hear more from Ron and Lourdes and Tony and the entire group, we've got that's a link to the playlist there on YouTube, which as you said, it can be heard on the X, which is on Monday nights at 9, is it, or 8?
Monday nights 9 o'clock. Yeah, but it'll be on Facebook and YouTube, and the UNX network streams it too. But then I think at 10 o'clock they switched the platform, I think radio wise, but we still stay on Facebook and YouTube.
Okay.
For the duration of the show, which is about an hour to an hour and a half, usually close to an hour.
Okay. Perfect.
That we do it.
Yeah, we've got that up there. So definitely, guys, go check that out. And anything else you want to promote? You said you've got the bash coming up. Anything else going on? Videos, anything that I've left out of the show notes or anything?
No, you did a fantastic job. I was excited and honored to be. What was it? I can't. Lourdes is actually reminding me of something. What was it? Oh, yes, we're doing Dead Inns, which is Haunted Hotels Live with Sam Baltrusis, Richard Estep, Intuitive April, the Psychic Housewife of New Jersey, as Becky Galantine, and us. I think that's everybody. We're recording one of the episodes. I think at the Farnsworth Hotel in Gettysburg next week on Friday, as well. The same night I'm speaking with Krista Chesler. So that's gonna be a busy day. And this is a brainchild product of Sam's, who, if you know Sam Baltrusis, he doesn't do anything halfway or mediocre. He's very good at what he does. Talented medium. And so Haunted Hotels Live doing Dead Inns. We're going to be doing one at the Shanley. I know that also. So that is also next week. The Mass Paracon we're doing the beginning of November. We're going to do a digital seance, I think, October 7th, back at the UFO Paranormal Museum in Pine Bush, New York, which is where we did the first one. That's where this photo actually was taken. That was the first event we did. And I would also like to take a moment to promote and plug you. I think that, we've talked before. I've known you for a little while. We've had you on Entity Voices. And even throughout this show, when you mentioned walking into locations and recording during setup and doing stuff, you're also a voice that needs to be heard. I think when you do thorough, detail-oriented work, you do it passionately and for the right reasons. That's so valuable in a field where media influence is more than not the professor to the classroom that is the internet for the most part. And so I think it's important. I think that even when you're not with an intended audience, when you're doing something that's visible to other people, you're in an opportunity to lead by example, and you do that. And I think that's important too. So I appreciate you. I was excited to be on the show because you're someone that I have a lot of respect for. So thank you for letting me babble for 2 hours and change.
Well, thank you for taking the time. Like I said, normally I'll go for an hour and a half. But if people are interested, absolutely. If people are interested in conversation, and if they've got the time for it, I'll go for several hours. So I just appreciate you taking the time, because I know you are busy and that, you've got a lot going on. And, you've always been somebody that since the very beginning, I remember having conversation with you, but before Ghost Biker even started. And, so I appreciate your support. And I felt like that, following you guys and listening, I feel like I've learned a whole lot just in best practices and that sort of thing. So thank you for, for your kind words. I do really appreciate that.
So my pleasure. We're part of a community, and that's the thing. Everybody wants the community to support and rally behind them, but you have to participate in it.
And I mistyped. I just saw that I mistyped Dead Ends, and it's Dead Ends.
Dead Ends, right? As in hotels, right? Thank you,
yes.
Tony. I always tell people that the field of paranormal research is not great because I'm in it. I'm in it because it's great. And it's people like yourselves and Tony, Cherie, Audra, Lourdes, and many of the people who are watching tonight that we know that are just, I love the people that I've met through doing this. And so,
absolutely.
If I'm proving anything, if you disagree with everything I say, but it makes you think, then I still did something. Because that's how you engage with information that's new to you, is you decide where it falls on your evaluation, on your assessment of how things work, and then you process it, but you always do that with respect and reverence for the place that it came from. And if somebody makes you think through agreement or disagreement, that's not a bad thing.
That's right. So again, thank you, Ron. I think that is a perfect word to end that on. Thank you all so much for your questions and comments over here in the chat room. I know we had a ton of different questions. I hope we were able to get to all of them, or at least most of them. And like I said, just keep an eye on the Ghost Biker Explorations Facebook, YouTube page, because we will be announcing a couple different events. Like I said, we've got the dual event that we're doing with Soul Sisters Paranormal at Octagon Hall on September 10th. Going to be part of the Deep South Paracon, which is going to be on September 23rd. And then also we've got a really, really big event that we're working with. We're going to have the folks from Wildcat Harley Davidson, as well as Kelly Burton from the London Laurel Tourism Commission. We're doing a 3-day weekend event that it's a meet and greet at the Wildcat Harley Davidson. That's going to be at the very end of September. And then on October 1st, we're doing a motorcycle ride, and we're actually stopping at 4 different locations. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and then we're doing a investigation at a location that's not been investigated too many times. We are going to limit the number, I think, to about 14 people as well. And then the next day, we're going to be going to a very, very special location. So it's going to be a 3-day event. We'll be announcing that soon. And those folks, Keith from Wildcat Harley Davidson and Kelly from the Tourism Commission, will be on the show as it gets just a little closer. So hopefully within the next, I know we keep saying within the next couple days, we're going to have the stuff up, but we will at least have Octagon Hall. You'll be able to purchase tickets tomorrow. So, and then also I believe that weekend in September that I didn't mention, the historic Scott County Jail is going to be at the Haunting in the Hills Storytelling Festival there in the Big South Fork. So we're going to have a lot of stuff on that. So a lot of big things coming up for us here with Ghost Biker Explorations, and everyone else coming up during the months of September leading up to spooky season there in October. So just stay tuned for some more information on that. And then, of course, next week, our guest is going to be, I should have actually had this pulled up here. Let's see, next week, I'm going to be having the guys from Fallen Hour podcast on, and we're going to be talking about some really great research. They had to back out the last time because they had some family commitments come up, but we did have them on at an earlier date. But we're going to be talking about some different things. Their life there on the Crow Reservation, and how they get some of their research, how it dates back. Where they use the Bible and different testaments and that sort of thing. So we're going to be talking some pretty deep stuff next week. So again, thank you all so much. And until next week, I hope everyone has a great week. Bye, everyone.